Ladies and gentlemen, in geopolitics, tone and timing is everything. 3 days before India's Prime Minister heads to Thailand for a meeting of the BIMSTEC, essentially a Bay of Bengal initiative, Bangladesh, one of the member nations, has made a strategic pivot towards China. Professor Muhammad Yunus's pressure play on India was on ample display as he wrapped up his 4-day China visit, called Beijing a good friend, and then signed 9 agreements with Beijing. Par for the course, except that Professor Yunus, the interim administrator of Bangladesh, dragged in Delhi into the conversation. Yunus, in what is being seen as a provocation by India, pitched Bangladesh as a savior of the seas, saying that since the northeastern part of India is landlocked, which means the 7 northeastern states of India are landlocked, China can access the Indian Ocean via Bangladesh. Listen in to what exactly he said.
7 states of India, eastern part of India, called 7 Sisters, they are landlocked country, landlocked region of India. They have no way to reach out to the ocean. We are the only guardian of the ocean for all this region. So this opens up a huge possibility. So this could be an extension of the Chinese economy, build things, produce things, market things, bring things to China, bring it out to the whole rest of the world.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, China's growing presence in the Indian Ocean is not something Delhi is comfortable with for multiple reasons. But to have a former friend offer this access is a matter of deep concern for India. Bangladesh was India's finest diplomatic success in the neighborhood. In a zone of changing geopolitical alliances, for the last 15 years, Bangladesh was a stable partner under Sheikh Hasina. Yes, Bangladesh had a strong relationship with China as well, but it never came at the cost of India. But all that changed when Sheikh Hasina was overthrown on August 5th last year and India gave her refuge. Ever since, the bosses in Dhaka have accused India of sheltering a war criminal and have openly, with a microphone, demanded her extradition. That hasn't happened, and Professor Yunus is going out of his way to tell India that he has other options. Now, why is this a headache for India? Why can we simply not ignore the attention-seeking utterances of Dhaka as desperate and delusional? Well, we can't, because for one, we share a 4,000-kilometer border with Bangladesh. Pakistan and China are 2 fronts we are already dealing with. We certainly don't want a third front opening up. But it's more than just that. And that's what I'm putting to my guests this evening who are joining me on the broadcast. Thank you all very much for being here. Veena Sikri is a former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh with us on the broadcast. Mir Rahman, thank you very much. You're joining us from Bangladesh. You're a journalist. I know it's Eid, so a double thank you to you for joining us. Commodore Kesnur of the Indian Navy, formerly of the Indian Navy, also a PhD. Thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast. He's a naval analyst. And Pathikrit Payne is a geopolitical analyst. He's joining us on the broadcast. Mir Rahman, can I start by asking you, what map of the world was Professor Yunus looking at when he made the statement that he did? Why did he say what he said, where he said, given that in the next 3-4 days he's in any case scheduled to meet the Prime Minister of India? Was this deliberate provocation or is this simply a pressure tactic, sir?
Thank you very much, and Eid Mubarak to everybody. So when I just read out the speech just sent to me, what Dr. Yunus has spoken about the Indian 7 Sisters and China's investment here. But I'm very surprised to see, I don't find any unusual thing here or nothing against India, because you have seen that in the last 5 years there is a development that Japan, you must hear about the Big B plan, which involves India, Bangladesh, and Japan. Japan is building up some infrastructure, especially deep sea port in the Bay of Bengal, just aiming at to channel more business to the Seven Sisters in the eastern part of India. So now Professor Yunus has offered China also the similar facility that China can also take the opportunity, and since there is a tax on Chinese goods towards US, there is a huge prospect of relocation of Chinese factories to other countries, and Bangladesh is desperately trying to get some investment from China, and that is why I think there is no strategic, what I should say, input for anybody in his speech. And what he was saying that why you are suspecting that the Bangladesh interim government is tilting towards China just to pit against India. This is not true, I think, because you have seen that what I have come to know from the foreign ministry here, and I'm sure that Bina Secretary, the Honorable former Ambassador of India in Bangladesh, she may also know that Bangladesh indirectly or informally approached India for a meeting between the two head of governments, I mean Dr. Yunus and Narendra Modi ji, but India did not respond. So if you find any strategic angle, I mean, you should dig into that. Why didn't India agree? Got my point?
Okay. Veena Sikri? Yeah, I get your point, and I'll put that to Veena Sikri since you mentioned her. Veena Sikri, Mir is essentially saying this. He's saying there is nothing unusual about what Yunus has said. There is no pivot towards China. And if India was so concerned about Bangladesh pivoting to China, then India should have responded when Bangladesh said that Yunus wants to meet Prime Minister Modi. In fact, they had said, the Bangladeshis had said that they want to meet Prime Minister Modi before they meet Xi Jinping. They want to come to India before they go to China. If India was so concerned of this so-called strategic shift, why did India not respond appropriately?
Well, first of all, I want to ask you, you are saying that Muhammad Yunus asked India that he'd like to come to India, and you are believing it. They are saying it, and you are believing it. It is not true. They have not expressed any interest in coming to India. They have not expressed any interest in meeting people in India. Even the Foreign Affairs Advisor Tauheed Hussain went first to China without any indication that he wants to come to India. He met our External Affairs Minister in New York, and it is our Foreign Secretary, Vikram Mishri, who went to Dhaka on the 9th of December 2024 to actually talk to the Bangladesh government. From that side, there's been absolutely no interest. In the first few months, even scheduled meetings were cancelled, various levels of meetings. And then finally, one BGB, BSM meeting has taken place. That's about the interest. There is no interest at all. Now, if Professor Muhammad Yunus is so keen to meet our Prime Minister, he should certainly express an interest in coming to India, which he has not done so far, firstly. Secondly, Mr. Mostafizur Rahaman has spoken about, he says, Japan, Bangladesh, India. Yes, there is this very interesting and strong collaboration. There used to be between Japan, Bangladesh, and India, but this is because of a three-way mutual agreement between the three countries. Muhammad Yunus on his own has no right or no business to offer any such collaboration to China without consulting India on it. Why is he doing it? We know that his visit to China was completely a non-starter. He got nothing from China at all. No important MOU signed. No agreement on concessions of rate of interest or rolling over of debt. Just vague promises that we will look into it. And then he makes this statement to the business community as though the Northeast is in his pocket. I mean, what is he talking about? I want to say one thing very clearly to the Bangladesh side. There have been agreements already concluded between India and Bangladesh on access by the Northeast Indian states to the Bay of Bengal. Through Feni, through the bridge built on Feni, right through Tripura, coming across the Feni River and going to Chittagong. Now, it is the duty of every successive government to honor those agreements and to continue to allow access to the northeastern states, to the Bay of Bengal through these agreements. Now, to say about it, to boast that it is in our hand, that we control this, shows a tendency, a set of mind that is completely anti-Indian. And it is very difficult to analyze that. Because why should Bangladesh ask for special interests as a lower riparian country? Why should they ask for sharing of river waters and ask for special concessions as a lower riparian when they on their part are not willing to organize earlier commitments or not willing to accept and implement earlier commitments on by the Northeast? So I think this is a very, very serious matter. And to speak about it in a third country without talking to India about it at all, it shows a lack of interest in improving his relationship with India or lack of wanting a dialogue with India. Because these things have to be talked bilaterally to see how we're going to honor previous commitments, how we're going to carry it forward.
Pathikrit Payne, Veena Sikri is saying this is what Muhammad Yunus has gone and said in Beijing essentially displays an anti-India mindset. How do you read that and how do you read the statement that he has made? I mean, for Bangladesh to call itself the savior of the sea, to invite China to have access to the Indian Ocean via Bangladesh is a bit too rich, given the fact that there is a reason why it is called the Indian Ocean. But how do you analyze what is happening vis-a-vis India, China, and Bangladesh? We know ties are frosty. Is it only because of Sheikh Hasina?
So Shreya, somebody poorly advised Yunus to use these tactics, and I think it's going to come down heavily. Look, Yunus can go to China, he can go to Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, anywhere he wants to have investment. That is his choice. He probably is hallucinating. There will be a Pakistan, there will be a Bangladesh-China economic corridor. That is fine. But who has given him the brief to talk about Northeast India? Is he talking about cutting off Northeast India? That is the message that Indians got. Secondly, I mean, when you say we are the guardians of the ocean, does the Bangladeshi Prime Minister and the country really want to know who is the guardian of the ocean? He is talking as if India does not have a navy. I mean, it's like, let me tell you, he is actually trying to provoke some kind of a reaction, and then he wants to show to the people of his own country, look, India is an enemy. Look, I have proved. Look, this is the way they are talking. Here is a person who is an unelected prime minister. He doesn't know how long he's going to stay as the prime minister. There can be a possibility of coup anytime. A lot of things happening within his country. Hundreds of factories have closed down. The anarchists are ruling the road. There is the dysfunctional police force. The army is saying that the country can get split. Under these circumstances, if you want to bring investments, most welcome. Please go and do that. India does not stop. But the moment you make such statements about Northeast, please understand that's a very sensitive issue. You are trying to bite more than what you can chew. And secondly, if you want to know who is the real guardian of the ocean, then let's face it. Then do not say to India that you are overreacting. That is the message. And let me tell you, I think China is a mature country. China knows what the situation is. They want to create a situation where Chinese get entrapped into this Bangladeshi game being played by Yunus and his mentors, so that tomorrow the Chinese get so much involved in this, face-off, that then the onus would be on them to create, to fight it out, as they're fighting it out in the China-Pakistan economic corridor, where the Pakistanis have entrapped them in the Gwadar port. So Bangladesh prosperity is well and good. They should prosper. They should have a functional democracy. All that is fine. But these kinds of statements show either he is very immature, that he is not a statesman, that he was paradropped, or he has a very, very sinister agenda, that he wants some kind of a reaction. I think India has shown enough maturity since August. There has been many provocations, Shreya, but India has shown restraint. And I think somewhat that restraint is being taken for granted by some people in Bangladesh, which I don't think it is in the interest of the greater relationship between these two countries. Guardian of ocean, as if he holds the brief for Northeast. I think it's unfortunate, but there will be some kind of a statement. And I would be happy if it is just a statement from India and nothing more. Because if it is something more than that, then it will be very difficult for, Chief Advisor Yunus or whatever he is to actually handle the situation. I think he would better be a little more mature if he has to stay back as the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Back to you.
Commodore Kesnoor, right now what is defining India-Bangladesh ties is strategic caution and strategic patience on the side of India, right? Because there are these provocative statements coming in, and there are a lot of things that have been said, as far as Sheikh Hasina being in India is concerned. Bangladesh wants her to be extradited. India has not said this, but well, India's essential stand is nothing doing. I want to ask you, is it that easy for us to dismiss what is clearly Bangladesh's pivot towards China? Look, the fact is that China has been Bangladesh's biggest trading partner, so that's not new. They've always had a good relationship. 70% of the equipment and arms in the Bangladeshi army, armed forces actually, come from China. Right? So all of that is there, but India and India's concerns have never been ignored. The relationship with China has never come at the cost of India. That is happening now. My point to you is, my question to you is, Commodore, is it so easy for us to dismiss Bangladesh's China pivot and say, रहने दो, बोलने दो जो बोल रहा है, ये तो बोलते ही रहेंगे कुछ ना कुछ, etc., etc. Given the fact that it's not just China, there is a Pakistan angle to it as well.
Well, you're right. Obviously, it's not easy for us to dismiss this. And as you're brought out, there has been increasing bonhomie between China and Bangladesh. And if you look at the arms sales, if you look at training, and if you look at a host of other activities, certainly there is much greater friendship. And now, if they were to actually execute a strategic pivot, as you call it, I mean, the jury is out on that. It remains to be seen whether this is merely some sort of grandstanding, whether this naivete, or they'll actually do something of that sort. Well, that's for the other experts to bring to bear. But certainly you have a point in suggesting that India should worry if indeed this sort of swing happens, because it will sort of go along with a whole lot of other things that Bangladesh has been doing in sort of steadily moving away from India, in sort of cozying up to China, in sort of trying to build bridges with Pakistan. So whether Bangladesh will become another Sri Lanka as far as China is concerned, whether it become a cat's paw, I think these are issues for us to worry about, because at the end of the day, geography matters. Now, irrespective, certainly there is no doubt that he should not have brought in the northeastern states, and that was unnecessary provocation. And there are legal treaties, but it's a factor of geography. Except that I'd like to point out that in his exuberance, Muhammad Yunus seems to have missed out the bigger geography of Bay of Bengal. I mean, if he's talking about how much the northeastern states seem to depend on Bangladesh for so-called guardianship, I think he's missing out the bigger geography of Bay of Bengal, and which navy is there. So I think he ought to have been a little serious when making these statements. But you're right, India needs to be equally concerned about shifts in Bangladesh's policy and greater cozying up to China and the strategic ramifications it would have. I'm not necessarily saying we should press the alarm button, but I think we need to take note and make our plans accordingly.
Okay. Veena Sikri then, I mean, there's a BIMSTEC meeting on the 3rd of April, and BIMSTEC, B is for Bangladesh and I is for India. So I don't know what Bangladesh and Professor Yunus were attempting here right before the BIMSTEC meeting. But Veena Sikri, diplomacy, and you know this better than I do, cannot happen in a TV studio. It cannot happen via a microphone. Diplomacy that is quiet is the one that works. Yes, Bangladesh, Professor Yunus have been provocative, right? They have been provocative ever since Sheikh Hasina took refuge in India and India has refused to give her back. We understand that dynamic. But given the larger picture involved, given the deep discomfort and distrust that India has with China, is it in India's best interest to actually speak to Bangladesh, for Professor Yunus and Prime Minister Modi to have a pull aside at BIMSTEC to say, look, this, don't cross this line, etc., etc. I mean, not engaging will not help us, right?
Look, let's be very clear. Engagement is to have a certain result and outcome. When a particular person is making it very clear that he's not interested in engagement, then it is our error not to recognize that. And I want to tell you, when you talk about provocativeness, that this clip that is being talked about what Muhammad Yunus said in China, was at least 4 or 5 or 6 days ago. But now, in a very provocative manner, the actual 30 to 60-second extract from his much bigger speech to the Chinese business has been placed on his Facebook account or one of his social media accounts. I don't know which one. Very provocatively, very timely. I don't think he wants a meeting with our Prime Minister. He's just trying to provoke. He's doing it deliberately. And one has to recognize all the signs. That's one thing. And secondly, I think that, Mohammed Yunus should know that we have many other access to the Bay of Bengal through Myanmar, for example. We have the Kaladan multimodal, that whole region of Rakhine state is now being controlled by the Arakan army. And there are all many things happening. So I think to be so arrogant and to completely out of context address a foreign audience on foreign soil and be so arrogant as to say that we control the Bay of Bengal and this is in our hands. There's no way to reach out to the ocean. I mean, this is absolutely factually incorrect. For all these years, Northeast states had been reaching the Calcutta port. Of course, it takes them a longer time and so on, and it's very time consuming in terms of energy and so on. But it's been happening. Exports from the Northeast are taking place, and we are working out all the time. We have all these agreements with the government of Bangladesh, which were concluded about access to Chittagong port or access to Mongla port, and then from there taking the inland river waterways, the route to reach Zakiganj on the other side, in the northeastern states. So, I mean, this is absolutely something that we have been working on. So I think that to say this is a deliberate provocation on the eve of the meeting, I mean, I think we have to recognize it as such because it comes on the top of a whole string of other equally provocative statements, anti-Indian statements, not at one time recognizing. You get people around you to give interviews to the media saying, oh, but we always want best relations with India, we want this and we want that. But when you yourself are speaking or when your foreign advisor is speaking, you're saying exactly the opposite. So what is the message you're trying to convey? This is very clear. I do not think any purpose will be served by a meeting at the BIMSTEC summit on this because the deliberately provocative nature of this putting out this information is meant for a certain purpose, and we would be wrong not to recognize that.
Okay. Mir Rahman, would you want to come in here? There is a consensus on two things on this panel. Number one, Bangladesh in its current dispensation has made up its mind about India, that an enemy's friend is an enemy. So till Sheikh Hasina continues to be on Indian soil, we are going to pivot to China, and we don't want too much to do with India. Number one. So there's a consensus on that. And the number two consensus is that Bangladesh really is not interested in having a conversation with India. Because if they were really interested, the sort of statement that Professor Yunus has made in China would not have come.
I understand your points, but my first note is that what Mrs. Sikri was telling that, and she straightly rejected the information that Bangladesh government did not approach to India regarding the visit. But when our government officials openly said that Bangladesh had approached, basically, I didn't find any protest or from the Foreign Ministry or External Affairs Ministry of India. So I don't buy Mrs. Sikri's argument. The second thing is about some speakers pointed about provocation. Now, it's very clear that when Bangladesh and India, people like us who are liberal Democrat and who oppose all kind of extremism, Muslim extremism or Hindu extremism or Jewish extremism, we don't want any kind of animosity between two neighbors, but we cannot proceed due to the hawkish elements, extremist elements inside the government in both India and in both Bangladesh. So that is a problem. And this, you see that some of your speakers, one speaker told very clearly that is the need for engagement. And Vinasikri clearly said there is no need of engagement because we know what is the perception of this government. So this is the problem. If people like her constantly saying that no talk, just go ahead with this kind of perception that this government is against India. One thing you should be clear that this government is not the entire Bangladesh. There are 160 million people, and we don't want any kind of rivalry with anybody. So my point is, first of all, Indian government they have to decide what they want. If they want to continue with this kind of, blaming and counter-blaming game, because I have told you very clearly what Veena Sikriji said, that this is not the way of talking involving Seven Sisters. By what he said, Dr. Yunus said the Seven Sisters is landlocked. This is an universal truth, like the sun rises in the east. So that is a landlocked.
Correct.
So what is the point? So he is, I think he's wise enough that when he proposed this point to the Chinese investors, to lure them, definitely without Indian consent, that will not materialize. That will never be materialized. So this is, everybody should know that. And this is, you don't have to be a scholar to know that Indian involvement is needed if China wants to do business in the Seven Sisters. This is very simple. So what is the provocation? This is what I think this is the beginning from Dr. Yunus.
I'm out of time. Okay, I'm out of time, but I'm glad I got a point of view from Bangladesh as well, and I got a point of view from India as well. As I said, 3rd of April is when the BIMSTEC summit is in Thailand. India's Prime Minister is traveling for the summit for 2 days. We'll see what comes of that. We leave it there for the moment. There's a question about whether India should engage with Bangladesh, given Bangladesh's tone and tenor at the moment. Most of our panelists seem to be suggesting it may not be a good idea at this point of time. We'll leave it there for the moment. We'll see what the Indian Prime Minister and the administration decide. Veena Sikri, thank you very much for joining us. Mir Rahman, thank you once again for joining us from Bangladesh. Commodore Kesnur, good to have you on the show. And Pathikrit Payne, always good to have you on the show. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. My colleague Shreya Upadhyay is joining you up next with all the day's top stories. Do stay with us.